Hey everyone, this is Dr. Tom Gerard, and I wanted to introduce you to chapters 22 and 23 for your managerial accounting here at Oral Roberts Online. So remember, managerial accounting is tools that you use in the toolbox. They're not specific rules that's required by GAAP that every corporation has to file out. So be sure to understand that all of these tools, you as a manager, managerial accounting, you use these tools in certain circumstances. Now, you're not required to use the rules for the most part. Now, there are some exceptions, but you're not required to use the tools. You only use them when you need them. Now, I will say the reason why I want to talk about this chapter when we talk about budgeting is because when you go out and get in the real world and you begin working, whatever environment you're in, the one tool that you will see used more than any others is the budget. And as we look at this chapter for budgeting, it's specifically to a manufacturing environment. So they do that because they go through, again, the raw materials, the materials in progress, that sort of thing. So remember, wherever you wind up in your career or in your life or even in your personal finances, the budget is one of the most important tools that you can gain from managerial accounting to use in your own life, or you will encounter in your careers, or even in your own personal business. So remember budgeting. Now, in this particular chapter, let's see if I got this chart. We got this chart you want to watch, because here's where it starts. It starts with sales. Because, okay, first of all, what is a budget? A budget is remember now, let's go back to financial accounting for just 1 second. Remember, at the end of the accounting cycle, we prepare the 4 financial statements: the income statement, balance sheet, statement of owner's equity, statement of cash flow. Okay, but think about the income statement. It says how much money did we make or lose. I mean, that's what most people are concerned in. How much did we make or lose, or profit, or did we lose last year? So the budget is where we're going to say, what do we look like next year? So the financial statements prepared for last year. Well, how did we do last year? Did we make money or did we lose money? The budget is saying, how are we going to look next year? How do we want to look next year? At the end of next year, I want to make a profit, right? I don't want to have a loss, perhaps. Or maybe we know that if we're a startup or something, we might have 3, 5, 10 years. Well, I don't take 10 years, you're in trouble if you're losing money for 10 years. But you might say, okay, I'm starting a business. I might not make any money this year, next year, the 3rd year, but on the 4th, 5th years, we're going to start making money. That's what the budget's about. At the end, you'll see here, the budgeted income statement. That means at the end of next year, what is our income statement going to look like? We know what the statement is going to look like this year because it's already happened. Last year, I guess I should say. But what is it going to be like at the end of the current year, right? Okay, and it starts with sales. So sales, production. To do production, what do you need? Now remember, this is looking at kind of like a manufacturing, but remember, you're learning a lot about costs. I'm talking really fast because I know I haven't really done some detailed videos on these like I normally like to do. But everything includes labor, overhead, and materials. If you're a doctor performing a surgery, you might put in a plastic hip. So your materials might be relatively small in relation to the cost of the labor because you're paying for the doctor's expertise. If you're making a product that's very heavy in materials, then that's a different situation, and that's why they go at it from a manufacturing standpoint. We look at the materials. So I don't need to go into that real detail. All you need to know is that when you're doing a budget, you're projecting your sales right up front. If you're in an entity, if you're a nonprofit or a governmental agency, you're projecting what is our donations going to be for next year? What is our income going to be next year? Whether that comes from taxes for a government agency, or whether you're a nonprofit and you're projecting, maybe you're a church, maybe you're a charity, you're trying to project how much money can we bring in next year, right? And if you're in an organization, a business, of course, how much are we going to sell next year? What's our revenue going to be? So it starts there. If we say we're going to create this much revenue, then we have to say, well, how are we going to make that revenue? Maybe we have to produce something. And again, maybe we're producing labor. We're an accountant, or we're a lawyer, or we're a doctor. We're producing labor, but maybe we're producing a product, and a product requires material, it requires labor, and everything requires factory overhead. So get real deep into this overhead, which you probably already have in your earlier chapters. So then that you got the cost of goods. So this is a cash budget. If I got to buy materials to make these sales, I need to know what they're going to cost. So part of the budget process is cash flow budgeting. Very important. Sales and administration expense. Okay, how much is it going to cost me to sell this? I can make this stuff, but to make the sales, it's going to cost me money. So that's a separate part. Now, these are all individual budgets. Each department does their own budget. Maybe you have a separate sales department and a production department, and maybe you even have a warehouse manager that's managing the materials coming and going. So these are all separate budgets. They all come together in the main budget, which is the total overall income budget. Now, I could talk all night and day on budgets. I used to be a budget director for quite a few years. I was chief financial officer, which my primary job was preparing the budget. If you're in a nonprofit or a government entity, you are required to do a budget. And so because I worked in the government, we were required to do a budget every year. That was one of my biggest jobs for the year. So anyway, that's chapter 22, budgeting. You will encounter a budget. What do they tell you when you are trying to put your own personal finances together? Make a budget, right? So in business, the same way. Not required by law in most cases, unless you're a nonprofit or government agency, then it could be. But for corporations, not necessarily so. Okay, so now let's go to the next chapter. And what's the next chapter? The next chapter is standard costs, standard and variable costs. So think about, let's see, take a look here real quick. Evaluating variances from standards. Well, what is a standard? Well, just think of this. When we're doing our budget and we say, well, we're building houses, we're a house developer, for example. I'm using this example because this is something we're going through right now in our country, right? We have a wood shortage. And if I'm building houses, and I was building houses back in 2019 before the pandemic, and lumber costs, a 2x4 cost, I remember buying one for $2.30. And then I went back later, just last year or this year, early this year during the pandemic, and the same 2x4 was $8. So what we do is because we were buying lumber as a home builder for many years, and we've been buying 2x4s for $2.50 to build houses, that's our standard, right? That's what we want. So obviously things go up and down in price. So maybe it's $275, maybe it's $225, but it fluctuates, but it's within this standard. So we build our budget. What is our materials going to cost? If I need 2x4s to build houses, and I'm figuring out that my standard cost should be around $2.50. Now, all of a sudden we have the pandemic, everything goes haywire, and what happens? Oh my gosh, it's $8 now instead of $2.50. So my standard it's a variance from my standard. That's what this variance is from standard. So I built my budget in 2019. We're going to build the budget for 2020. And we think that lumber might go to $275, and so we set our instead of $250 we paid in 2019, we're going to increase it a little bit because that's just the way we set our standard for the next year, because we know materials are going to go up. So when we put our budget together for 2020, we said 2x4 is going to cost us $2.75. Well, what happens? The pandemic comes, and oh my gosh, it's $8, and so now our standard was set at $275. The variance from the standard is big, right? I got to do math. It's $6 and something, right? So we got a problem. We got a huge variance in our cost of materials. So that's what standards is. You set a standard for whatever it is that you're doing. Remember, this whole managerial accounting is a lot about costs. What's our standard costs? What should it be? And what is it really what does it turn out to be? And so we have to adjust our budget, perhaps, especially obviously we did a budget maybe in 2019 for 2020, and it's completely out of whack, right? So we've got to redo our budget and see where we're at. Okay, so that's all. I wanted to hit you on those two topics because budgeting is something that you not only will you see, like I said, in your career, but you should do it for your own business if you start your own business. I know many of you are entrepreneurial people that want to start your own business someday. Maybe you already have a business. You've never thought about doing a budget maybe, but it's very important. Also, in your own personal life, if you want to manage your own finances, write down. What do they say when you want to lose weight? Write down everything you eat. When you want to make a budget for your personal finances, write down everything you spend money on, right? And that's the first step. And so you'll see that these chapters are important in your own personal life as well as for learning and getting a good grade on the test, right? Okay, thanks for listening, and I will see you next week.